Today on the Amped Up to 11 podcast, Jenny Rolf Pollreis. Jenny is a left below the knee amputee who describes herself as a fitness fanatic. This fitness trainer continues to inspire the entire amputee community through her video blog and positive content on social media platforms. Jenny has participated in competitive national bodybuilding and brings a fascinating perspective to our entire audience. We are proud to introduce to you Jenny Rolf Pollreis. Jenny, how you doing? Good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I am glad you're here, and I am glad that we were able to pivot and put you on the show via Zoom. It looks good.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah. You want to tell the audience why you're on Zoom and not on our normal platform?
Because I don't carry around a laptop with me. So
Oh, like in your back
it's at
pocket, you
work.
mean?
Right. My pockets aren't big enough.
So, as you mentioned before we went on today, you are post-workout. This is the Jenny after the gym.
That's right.
There's Jenny on the block, and then there's Jenny after gym. And this is Jenny after gym. So what was the workout like this evening?
We did some back and biceps and about an hour of the stair mill after work, after an 8-hour shift. So
Wow, that's impressive. You're making me feel very small right now. How dare you? No, it's okay. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you were able to take the time. And of course, I have been following you and very much believe that you offer a really interesting and extraordinary perspective in the amputee community. I think the thing I would like to ask you to sort of kick things off is, if you were going to think about what has surprised you most about being an amputee, how would you describe that? What would you say?
I would say that what has surprised me the most about being an amputee is how much I have learned that I can accomplish by being an amputee. How strong I have become from the challenges of being an amputee. And I honestly can say that going through what I have been through the last 21 years is learning that I can overcome and push myself to do anything as long as I believe to.
Yeah. And I would agree with that sentiment myself. And certainly I continue to, let's say, surprise myself on what I'm capable of. And not that I wasn't an active person before amputation, but certainly not as active as I am now. And I hear this often from active amputees, and I don't know if you're in the same camp, but so often I hear, I was not able to adapt to being an amputee successfully unless I really, really upped my game in terms of my fitness level, that I was using muscles I had never used before. I was essentially requiring more energy to be mobile, to be able to even do everyday things. And I was reading what seemed like a strange statistic, and it was talking about how amputees, specifically leg amputees, it was like use like 35-40% like more energy to walk than someone who has both limbs. And I thought, wow, is that why I was sweating so much when all this started? You know, is that why my residual limb was collecting, all that fluid at
A
first?
pool.
Because it's pretty shocking, isn't it? Like when you first don, a prosthesis, and yeah, you go out in the summer heat or something, and you're walking around, and you're thinking, what on earth? How could this much sweat come out of this little limb? Like, how is that
It,
even
it,
possible?
exactly. Like half those muscles aren't functioning, but yet you're literally creating a
Right.
pool. I know I had when I first learned to teach my I taught myself to walk, and I was a personal trainer for 15 years, and a bodybuilder. So when I work out daily, the amount of sweat is just astronomical. I would get run on the treadmill when I got to that point and have to stop and dump out the sweat and then put my leg back on and continue. I'll do the same thing. I'll be running down the street, um, going for a run or chasing the grandkids, and have to stop and dump my leg out. And it's been 20 years. I still got to stop and dump. So you get people that are stopping to see if you need help. And you think at that point, like, do you call AAA or do you call 911? You know?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Talking about, being able to run. That's, I'm about 6 years into this. The one thing that I'm lacking in my notes on you is, how did you become an amputee?
This is a very long story. I'll try to sum it up as much as I can. But
Fire away.
And in 2001, I was in a motorcycle accident. I was passenger on motorcycle, and a lady had pulled out in front of us and couldn't swerve, couldn't miss it in time. So we took the hit, and the driver had hit her minivan, and I had rolled with the bike. Well, the bike landed on my back. However, my leg hurt, which was odd. I was able to get up, help push the motorcycle off to the side of the road. It was 35 mile an hour, at the time, no big deal. And I just collapsed. So I went to the hospital, and I was treated and released for a sprained ankle.
Mm.
So there shortly after, it wasn't getting any better. Like my foot started inverting. So I was literally walking on the outside of my foot. It had turned. Um, and so they were assuming that the tendons were over tightening. Um, and so they did x-rays and fluoroscope, which is an x-ray under movement, and couldn't figure out where the deformation is coming from. Well, then the muscles just started contracting so bad that we had to do tendon transfers and surgeries to try to correct the deformation of what was happening with my legs. So I went through 7 surgeries to try to correct what was going on with my leg, and they still didn't have a diagnosis until I was sent to the University of Iowa um, about a year and a half later, and they found that it was a spinal cord injury from the accident called a post-traumatic focal dystonia. Happens to about 1 out of 1 million people. So what had happened is it pinched the spinal cord just enough to affect the nerves on um, the left side of the leg. So all the tendon transfers and stuff that they were doing, the muscles were contracting so hard that it was literally tearing those tendons away from the bone. And sitting through this, my children were very young at the time. I learned to carry a baby carrier on crutches. I crawled to do laundry, single mom, taking care of them,
Mm.
going through all of this. Um, so at the University of Iowa, they found that there was one other case. Yes, it was a female. She had 28 surgeries before they elected to amputate. And I said I wasn't willing to go through that. So I educated myself and then had to, prove I wasn't crazy, because here I am, 22 years old, electing amputation. So the intranet just came out then, and went and figured out that there was runners out there. There was all these people that could do amazing things being an amputee. And I'm like, that's it. That's my ticket out. little did I know that the hard road it would take to overcome and become that runner.
Mm-hmm.
So many people that go into amputation just assume that, okay, I'm going to get a prosthetic and I'm going to run out of there.
Yeah.
And as those amputees will soon find out, or no, it's not that simple. So, anyways, we did one more last ditch effort to try to save the leg. It did not work. I had a shot of Demerol during that surgery that I found out I was allergic to, and I coded, and I was without oxygen for so long that it left me with epilepsy. So I have scar tissue on both frontal lobes, and now am epileptic because of that surgery. So the next time they put me under for um, the amputation itself, we had to take extra precautions so that I'd wake up
Sure.
and be able to walk. However, that's how I became a 23-year-old amputee.
Yeah, and you made some good points there that I just want to circle back on. I do believe that there is that public perception post amputation of, well, yeah, you come out of surgery and they hand you your cool brand new running blade, and then you just kind of charge off into the sunset, not really understanding that those, very dramatic, sexy, inspiring photos that I also looked at, you know, on the internet, and I'm about 6.5 years post-op. So I had a lot of internet to look at. It was the internet was in full force at that point. So there was all of those sort of misguided misperceptions, all those things where you think, um I hate to use the word easy, but hey, this isn't going to be that bad. And I didn't, coming to an amputation, I didn't know what, prosthesis even looked like. I mean, I do recall reading about, Pistorius, the runner, and he had the cool running blades. And I mean, that was interesting, but I didn't really like gravitate towards that. It just sort of passed me by. But now that I was facing, what we both experience, I was somewhat fascinated in, well, how is this gonna look? Like, what do these things look like? And then you're seeing, different styles, different blades, different feet, different sockets, different this, different that, and all that stuff. And I have to say, it can be overwhelming as to, well, what is the path to glory, in that situation? And I think the thing that surprised me the most was the huge, huge sort of canyon between the medical community on one side and the practitioners and people in prosthetics on the other, and how very little those two entities communicate with each other. Because I can't tell you how often I go and see my normal medical doctors now. They look at my leg and they'll say right to my face, I have no idea like what that is on your leg right now. I don't know what it does. I don't know how you bear weight on it. I don't know what effect it is having on your residual limb. I don't know anything. And I've actually sat in my GP's office and helped him write a prescription for my prosthesis. And that's just, it's bizarre to me that we have
It is
this.
absolutely bizarre, and it's mind-boggling because, you would think that being a medical doctor, they would know the biomechanics of of a prosthesis, but they really don't have any clue. So, as you had said, you have to help them write a prescription. I'm a K4. What does that mean? Why do I need that? This is what I want to be able to accomplish. Without that prescription, you can't have it, but yet they have no clue what it means.
Yeah, exactly. Were you before your accident and then obviously your unfortunate subsequent surgeries, how active were you before that?
Well, I was a gymnast as a kid and a farm girl. Worked physical jobs. So I've always been active, but not as active as after becoming an amputee, because like I said, I was going through all those surgeries in a wheelchair on crutches for so long that I put on an astronomical amount of weight for myself. I mean, some people would say, 220 pounds isn't a lot, but, when you're a small stature as I was, that is a lot. And having that weight on the prosthetic, it makes it harder to move and function. So it's really mind over matter. So I went to a physical therapy appointment, and I was young, mind you, and they wanted me to use a walker, which having young kids taking advantage of me was not feasible. And I would thought, I'm too young to use a walker. I am not doing this. So I took matters in my own hands and um, did it myself.
Yeah.
I started doing Pilates because I could lay on the ground and function and squeeze those muscles, and literally worked myself from the ground up, taught myself to walk by using crutches, by using just core muscles, treadmill, bike. I would bike for, I mean, hours at a time. And the weight started coming off. Of course, confidence builds, those secondary muscles build. And I figured if I can do it myself, then I can teach others as well. So becoming an amputee basically laid out the path for me to become a personal trainer and teach others, disabled, overweight, no matter what the ability, uh, to lose weight, put on muscle, do what they needed to do biomechanically, and physically, to become the best of them.
And your clients are able-bodied as well. They're not they don't have disabilities, do they?
Absolutely. I would say 90% of my clients were able bodied. Um, I did have a few that I would train via, I mean, we would use Messenger then because it was before Zoom and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But so kind of like when online training first came out, that's what I would do. But I trained in the gym, like I said, for 15 years, all types of body types, but mainly able bodied.
Yeah, and how do you tell your trainer who's missing a leg, "I can't do it"?
There you go. There you go.
Do you do you ever
I kind of had the market.
do you ever use that
And then it's,
do
of
you
course, that they
do
ask, like, oh, who's your personal trainer? They're like, Jen. Well, I don't know that. There's, 1,000 Jennies or Jens, but oh, the one legged lady, everybody knows the peg leg trainer. So
Yeah. Yeah, and that's your handle. So I was gonna say, how often do you have to pull that card out, Like, "Hey, I'm operating with one leg here, and I can do it. I think you can do it," Because people I
yeah,
mean, because this is your business, people create excuses. I mean, that's just how it is, and it's always harder to get really, really uncomfortable. Now,
absolutely.
that being said, true progress comes from getting really uncomfortable. And I was talking to actually on another episode of the podcast, I was talking to a triathlete, and I was saying, okay, like what's the X factor? Like what is it when you're running those races, when you're trying to finish a marathon, when you're trying to push yourself to that absolute limit? And I said, what is it what's the secret sauce? And he said, you know what it is? You have to be able to get comfortable with pain. That's what it is. You have to be able to live in the pain cave. If you can get through that, that's when you find, those achievements. That's when the light happens. It's just those moments when and I'm not, please don't send me email. I'm not promoting hurting yourself. I'm not promoting that. However, to do what you do, which, especially with bodybuilding, I mean, it's a very repetitive, very focused, very regimented, disciplined activity. And it's not designed around comfort. I mean, when you look at the the calculus, the equation that creates muscle mass, okay? It's kind of terrifying when you look at it on a scientific level, because you're literally breaking something down so that it grows back bigger and stronger. So
Exactly.
you're kind of like, okay, I got to break myself to come back stronger, right? That to me is an equation for pain. It's pain.
Absolutely.
And, I always say, like, how do you cross that bridge into knowing, okay, it's happening for me right now, right? So when did bodybuilding, because that, of course, that fascinates me, especially as an amputee. When did that sort of get in your purview? Like, when did that become a thing or a possibility in your mind?
Well, it was when I had been a trainer for, I would say, probably 5 or 6 years into it. And like I said, I trained all body types. But and I taught myself to run, and I taught myself to do gymnastics again. So here I am doing back handsprings and round offs and flips and teaching Pilates, and training all different body types. I've lost the weight. I, put on muscle mass. I've done this with other people. That was the one thing that someone came to me and said, I want to train for a show. Well, I didn't feel comfortable training them for bodybuilding unless I did it myself. Like, if you're going to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. I'm not going to tell you not to eat this, but yet I'm going to go ahead and
Right.
do it myself. So,
Yeah.
and I'm very firm believer in that. So I that's when bodybuilding became in my scope, is when I had people come to me and say, "Hey, I want to look like you. You should do a show." Well, then I better do a show. When I started training, I had I go all natural, so everything is lie detector tested and urine analysis. So to ensure that everything is natural, because bodybuilding is filled with steroids and
Sure.
everything else that
Yeah, all of that's
um,
been pretty well documented.
right, obviously. So
Yeah.
that was a huge thing to me, is that it's got to be all natural. So learning that proper diet in order to put on that muscle mass, somebody at my stature, and then teaching others to do the same as well. Um, so learning that was just another scope of what more I could achieve, and then getting those muscles, like you said, it's a fine recipe, so to speak. You're missing half of a leg. So how do I get those muscles to match? Because you're overcompensating on the hip in order to swing the prosthesis, so the left side's going to deteriorate. So now I'm in a show and everything has to, they judge you on your composition.
Yeah.
Everything has to match.
Right.
So it's learning how to contract those muscles without having the weight when you don't have the physical body there, literally. So
Right. Right. Have you seen the that documentary? on Arnold Schwarzenegger? Have you watched that?
Um, which one? There's a million
Well,
of them,
there's well,
but
pardon me. It's very recent, and I believe it's on Netflix right now. I think it's just called Arnold.
I have not watched it yet.
Okay, so I only knew him pretty much as like an action, movie star kind of person. I didn't really understand so much his background in terms of how he kind of revolutionized bodybuilding, how he sort of kind of set the bar for where things were going to go in terms of those competitions. And I think the thing that kind of resonated with me the most was his unbelievable level of focus, his just his passion for his body, and that nothing, literally nothing, was going to get in his way of achieving the results that he wanted. And he admits to, using steroids and things, um but there's still, even putting that aside, the amount of time and dedication and just laser beam focus that it takes to reach those levels was extraordinary to me. I mean, and I'm not generalizing here. You almost have to be like a little crazy, like a little
Oh,
obsessed.
obsessed. That's the correct term. And you're absolutely right. Like people just assume that you can take steroids and bulk up and get strong.
Right.
Well, anybody who's had a cold before knows that no, it doesn't work that way. You have to work
Yep.
no matter what. It is laser beam focus. Yeah, it helps, but so in order to do that as an amputee, to be a bodybuilder as an amputee and natural, you just have to work harder, just as you do to be a normal person.
Yeah.
Um, and then when I started competing, they didn't have an amputee class. A lot of professional shows do now. They
Mm.
have a class just for disabled. They have a wheelchair class. They have an amputee class. And I'm sure I'll be corrected because I haven't been around those. But I felt that I worked just as hard, if not harder, than the able bodied people up there that
Yeah.
I was going to compete able bodied. So every show that I have done, which has only been two, but every show that I've done is against able bodied.
And how did that make you feel in that situation? I mean, was there an ounce of hesitancy, insecurity? I mean, or did you feel like this is just how I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to approach it.
That's exactly it. I fought so hard because, like I said, I've been an amputee for 20 years. So back when this happened, there's tons of progression in the last 20 years from when I first became an amputee. Like I would literally break carbon fiber feet, like one a year.
Yeah.
I've gone through 20 different feet, just destroy them, literally be running down the road and break.
Wow.
So I've broken sockets. I have, broken titanium joints. My prosthesist, would literally come meet me in a parking lot to come fix me. So that's when you have a really good
Yeah.
prosthesist. But
I'm going to have to
um,
crawl home if you don't come here.
yeah, exactly. Or they know me. I'll take a grinder to it myself and make it work. So
Yeah. It's funny. We
that's
we become like little engineers, with these prosthetics. We're like, "Oh, I see how this works now."
Yeah, exactly. And being a farm kid and a mechanic's daughter, like, trust me, I can fix it.
Right,
I'll throw
right.
some duct tape on there. I'll see you in a week. But then after it fixed myself up and go, I actually found a foot that worked for me. And it's funny that you mentioned that canyon between uh, your doctor and your prosthetist. There's also that canyon of mechanics that every person needs to try, because everything is different for every single person. You
Yeah.
have a liner, you have, which type of suction you want to use, which foot works for you, which is best. And then you have those that don't quite get the mindset, don't want to be as active. At least that's what I've come across. And I've done many, many years of amputee outreach and helped. And over the years, I've found that the more active and the more able bodied I've become, the more people don't relate anymore.
Mm.
Like, oh, you don't get it. You're fine. Like, no, I've
Oh,
went through it too,
yeah.
No, I have this problem. There's just more excuses now, um, than there used to be when I was first an amputee. And maybe that was because I had more compassion.
Mhm.
And, hopefully I don't get any haters on this, but I've gotten to the point now that I'm like, no, you really can do what you want if you set your mind to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's same thing with bodybuilding. It's like you said, you got to be a little bit crazy.
Yeah,
Like I
I
never would have thought I'd be running.
well, I always refer to it as, the whole wanting it bad enough concept, that if there's anything you want bad enough, you can do it. And, I tend to feel somewhat the same way, in that the more, and that was a perfect way of putting it, the more able-bodied I become. And, you know, again, I don't like haters either, because I sometimes I say things and I'll get these DMs like, it's not as easy as you think, and it's like, well, wait a minute, I went through it too. I didn't just, suddenly do things that come easy now. It took some time and some dedication. But sometimes I find, and going to the prosthetist and going to their office, and on a busy day, right? Because there's, let's say, a dozen amputees in the room, and my prosthetist brings out, my prosthesis and says, okay, get, you know the drill, give it a test drive, and let's see if we need to make adjustments. And I'm walking around and I'm going over the stairs, and I'm just, I'm jumping up and down a little bit. I'm just trying to get, a feel. And suddenly I notice this, like, kind of like disdain for me. Like, wow, well, must be nice
Right.
must be nice that it's so easy. And, or someone will say, well, man, you just went right up those stairs. Like, what's that all about? Wait a minute. Back up. This is not where you start. This is
Right.
this is work. I go to the gym and I do the Stairmaster. I do my, when I started, it was like 10 flights. I'm done. I'm just done. I'm pooped, you know? And that has to become 100 flights somehow. You got to get there somehow, right? Because, like you mentioned, all those secondary muscles that you've never used before, ever in your life, suddenly all those have to get developed. And all of those magical things need to happen through the process of adaptation, which is now I'm relying on other parts of my body to do the things that I can't do anymore. And the only way I'm going to overcome those obstacles is if I gradually push myself, I gradually get there. But I do see out in the community sometimes, there's sort of this comparison thing that goes on, or maybe they're getting a better leg than I am, or things of that nature. They have better insurance. I see this amputee envy that goes on, that I sort of want to squash, because everyone has a struggle. Everyone is at a particular point in the timeline. When I first became an amputee, I could not wear a rigid socket. I just couldn't. I was in way too much pain. I like yourself, I was much heavier than I am now. I had to use an adjustable because an adjustable allowed me to manage my fluid buildup reduction a lot better than ply socks. Ply socks just did not work for me. So I needed an adjustable socket just to be able to, sort of let the steam, have that safety valve where I could give myself some breathing room when I was sitting because I was in like horrible pain when I would stop. Usually I was fine when I was walking around, but
Absolutely.
the second I would stop, it was like, "Oh my gosh, my leg is in a vice. I'm dying.
Mhm.
I'm dying." And having an adjustable allowed me to give myself some relief and say, "Okay, I can breathe again." Whereas now I wear a rigid socket and it's the most comfortable thing to me. But getting to where I am now, it was just such an incredibly laborious process of trial and error, trying different things. Like you said, different liners, different types of suction, if you're vacuum, having an opportunity to try those things and to see what works for you. And then, for a high functioning amputee like yourself, when you're engaging different activities, I would only imagine, and maybe you can help us understand your hardware situation. you know, is there a one leg fits all, or is it a number of different types of technology that you have to use depending on your activity?
And that's a great point, and I get asked that a lot. There are, and I have seen multiple people that, have a leg for running, that have a leg for swimming, that have a leg to do multiple different things. Being a personal trainer, um, being a manager for UPS for 5 years, where I traveled all over the United States and taught people how to load trucks, and then um, went and sat in an office, and then went and swam, and then went and ran. I did not have the time, and still don't have the time or the patience for that matter, to switch out legs. Or I couldn't travel all over the US with 5 different legs. I mean, I suppose I could, but
Yeah.
they allow you a medical bag. But for me personally, that's not feasible. I'm training one person to try to walk in the water, and then I have the next client coming in that I needed to train, for bodybuilding. And then I have the next client who is on a walker because they're, 500 pounds overweight. I can't change my leg for everything that I'm doing to help support them. So I had to find what worked for me, kind of a one leg fits all. And I went through 20 different feet. As I mentioned, most of them broke until I found the foot that works for me, which is the rush foot. Um, and so I am avid, and I have worked with and love that foot, and have owned every type of rush foot since. I have my one foot that allows me to go through the water, that allows me to run, that allows me to lift, that allows me to climb up and down ladders and work 18-hour shifts, and do everything that I need to do on one leg. I literally wake up in the morning, put my leg on, do not take it off until I go to bed.
No, that's super helpful and nice to know that you've landed in that place because so often I think, well, how much is my insurance going to cover? How many different things, how many different types of prosthesis am I going to be able to get approved for medical necessity so that I can do all the things that I like to do? And I feel like I'm in a pretty good place like yourself right now, where I can pretty much do everything I would like to. I've definitely considered I'm an avid cyclist. I'm a drummer, uh, and I lost my right leg. So, you know, uh, pretty important limb, to lose as a drummer. I would have much preferred it be my left, but oh well. I'm looking to get into running in the in the baby phase, like, it'd be nice to go for a jog kind of deal.
Hmm.
And, I wanted to bounce that off of you and see, how does that process start? You know, what would you say someone like myself who's never done that, what's that going to be like? What should I be looking for? Um, how do I graduate up to the point where, okay, I'm going to, go run a few miles and, what would be your recommendation? I'm I'm trying to get some free personal trainer advice.
Absolutely. You and everybody else. No, I'm not a personal trainer anymore, but I do work for free sometimes. Anyways, honestly, it's just whatever you have now, try it. You have to try to overcome and adapt, whether it's just starting to walk faster. You had mentioned, walking up a flight of stairs or using the Stairmaster when it's only 10 flights and you have to turn that into 100. You're going to start by jogging 20 steps.
Yeah.
Soon that 20 steps can turn into this, can turn into that. If you start getting sores and issues on your residual limb, it's a possibility. It's the fit. It's the way that your shin's gonna hit harder on the front than it would if you were just walking.
Mm,
So the biomechanics of that foot may not work for what you're using it for. I started running on a brick as they explained it. I was in like the cheapest my insurance would cover because it was just Medicaid at the time, or Medicare. That's all I had. And like you said, that's another issue that every amputee has to deal with is what are they going to cover this time? My liner's ripped. They'll only cover this much at a time. I mean, I've learned to use marine glue to keep liners together to plug holes because insurance will only allow you so much of durable medical equipment each year before you're paying out of pocket, and this stuff is not cheap. um and some of those insurance companies won't even cover a K4.
right.
Some of them won't cover a prosthetic at all. It's not a necessity to have a prosthetic. We covered a wheelchair this year,
Yeah.
so they're stuck in that wheelchair. Then you have to go out and try to find funding or volunteer work. So, anyways, back on the topic of running, I guess my suggestion would be to, like I said, just try it. I have never been on a running blade. I don't know how it feels. What I have works great, and it works great for me.
Yeah.
My insurance won't cover a running blade. Um, there are ways that you can get them. You can apply for grants and whatnot. But I myself feel that there are people out there that would benefit from it more than I would because I can function on what I have.
Yeah, so it's just an
Uh,
it's just an incremental you just start, I mean,
right,
what's that saying, the just do it, the
right.
stop
The
talking. Yeah.
Nike slogan.
Stop talking, just do it. Yeah, there's
Right.
nothing more
Run,
annoying.
Forrest, run.
There's nothing more annoying than someone that just talking, talking, talking. Like, come on. Just
Right.
do the thing. The one thing I wanted to mention and get into a little bit before we lose you here. Um, there was a social media post that you put out that sort of resonated with me, and you've got a look on your face like you know what I'm talking about. Um, so it was kind of a glamorous photo of you, and you were exposing your residual limb in the photo, and it, some of what you said like really really resonated with me and really got me thinking about how that applied in my own life. And I you know of course I've taken photos with my prosthesis off, but I'm always wearing a liner sock,
Hmm.
always. And it's such a vulnerable sort of place when your residual limb is, for lack of a better word, is naked. And it's something that there are times I look at my residual limb, admittedly, And it's just bizarre. I mean, it's bizarre looking. And we as humans, we get so used to, we have this picture in our mind of what our anatomy is, and the idea of taking a photo, exposing my residual limb it's a bit terrifying. And I, I could really relate to some of what you were saying. In this is, something that you put out there, and we never know what the feedback is going to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it would seem to me that in that moment, yes, it was, very revealing, very vulnerable, but the way I perceived it was like it really showed like incredible strength in what you were projecting in that moment. And yeah, I just, I mentioned it only because I wanted to understand better what you were feeling in that moment too.
Oh, and I know exactly the post you're talking about, and I'm very active on social media for those that want to check it out. But for me, it was a boudoir shoot that was focusing on people that were disabled but finding the beauty in themselves. And for me, like being a bodybuilder, I would stand up on stage, I mean, just shy of, band-aids on,
Yeah.
and be judged and critiqued over anything else and feel comfortable doing that. But
Hmm.
having a picture with my leg off, that is, like you said, literally naked.
Yeah.
Um, so that to me is the first time that I mean, I have shown other amputees like wounds that I would get from prosthetic swords or stuff like that. But to be, like you said, in that vulnerable position to where the beauty is focused on what I like to see the least of myself.
Mm.
So putting it out there that there can be beauty in what you've overcome. It's just showing or taking off the mask. That leg is the mask that we hide behind. Without that leg on, I can't walk.
Yeah.
I'm crawling. I
Yeah.
can't, you know, um, function like a able-bodied person. It's literally as vulnerable as you're going to get is when you take that off. I mean, for lack of a better explanation, I always said what's left looks like a giant penis. So,
Yeah, there's those funny pictures that go around in the amputee groups, where
right,
some dude is like he's like dangling his residual limb, like,
right,
he's got like a pant leg on this side, and then he's just dangling it in the middle. And those
right.
you and those usually get like removed. So I'm always like,
Yeah,
"Oh, come on.
exactly. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just people being silly. It's no big deal."
right,
You know?
right, exactly.
But
But
no,
just
I appreciate what you're saying. I really do. It's that whole idea, I think, is very, very important. That lesson is very important for us all. And when you talk about when that leg is off, the feelings that come with that. Now, not to be, super macho traditional sounding, but as a man, feeling that I can't protect the ones I love when my leg is off is very it's very difficult for me. So feeling that, I can't keep everyone safe once my leg is off, because if something were to happen, hold on a second, Mr. Intruder, I've got to put my liner on and get my leg on.
no, you're exactly right. And I'm a very independent person, and I will be the one out there. I mean, my husband gives me grief all the time, but I love to mow. I love to take care of the yard. I know more mechanics than he does. I will literally go out there and mow and say, no, you're not doing it right. So get out here
Yeah.
in the way. But when I go to bed at night, I have to take my leg off. When I get up in the middle of the night, I crawl just because I know I can't fall. You're already on the ground.
Yep.
So you can't fall. But I'm raising my grandchildren right now. And if they, Nana, come get me, I have to, put on my leg
Yeah.
in order to walk into their room. You have to, if there was a fire, so hang on, let me
Yeah.
get my leg on,
Exactly.
so yeah, like you said, that being able to protect the ones you love, or even get up and run after them if they've,
Hmm.
fallen down the stairs,
Absolutely.
just
No,
it's
I
very
agree.
vulnerable.
And I've got a granddaughter myself, and she'll just she- she'll ask to play with my leg, and then she'll just walk off with it. And I'm thinking, hold on a second. I'm gonna need that. But how do you feel like when you look through the lens of your grandkids in terms of them, seeing you as an amputee? Like, what's that experience like?
Well, like my youngest granddaughter is grown up with it. So she doesn't know any different. So to her, it's just second nature. Now, these littles that littles as I call them, that I'm
It's
raising
cute.
now, they were with their biological parents for 3 years in Kansas. So they didn't really know me super well until they were dropped off on my doorstep. And it's Nana with the robot leg.
Yeah.
So they had to get used to, that's your robot leg. That's your prosthetic. When I wore pants, they couldn't understand where it went.
Mm.
Yeah. Or let me see your leg. Let me see the mechanics of it. And now they're okay with it. My children, when they were younger, they would do the same thing. They'd run off with my leg, or they'd try to wear it themselves. And I'd be like, okay, come back. They'd take my wheelchair and go up and down the street and race with it. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But so, like, my children had to grow up with it. And my children are now 27, 23, and 22. And they will still notice the stairs.
Hmm.
That's all people look
Yeah.
at. And they're like, "Mom, they're looking at you." I don't notice it anymore. The my grandkids now, will stop to explain to little kids that say, what's that? Because that's normal nature. And
Sure.
their parents will try to pull them back and, no, don't talk to them. And I'm like, no, that's absolutely normal. If I see somebody with hot pink hair going down the street, I'm going to turn and look too.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with a prosthetic. You just explain. Um, rather than pull them away. So I got a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old saying, "That's my Nana's robot leg."
Yeah.
And the other kids are just like, okay, it's parents or adult perception that are afraid to ask or to learn for that matter.
Yeah, I agree. And children have a great way of not only being a buffer, but also being an appropriate messenger of a lot of those particular pieces of information. They can handle that dialogue a lot better than we can. And my granddaughter refers to my prosthesis as my robot leg, and she refers to my residual limb as my baby leg.
There you go.
She says, "That's your baby leg." And I'm like, "Okay, if that's what you think it is, that's fine.
Yeah.
Whatever works." Out of the mouths of babes. But no, I continue to be so inspired by your story. I so appreciate you taking the time and giving us a little more of a personal sort of perspective on you, and what's happening with you. What would you consider to be your next big goal?
That's like I said, I've been raising these little guys for about a year. They were just kind of shown up. So everything that I would have thought of as a goal in the future is kind of been a day by day since we don't
Right.
really know exactly what's going on. I was scheduled to have a revision in March, but raising littles, I had to put that off. So we have had to, I have some residual skin that needs to go away. So I am currently in um, my prosthesis care. I'm using a pin lock and liner to hold my skin where it needs to be. I continue to work out. So, goals for itself is like I said, it's going to have to be day by day.
Yeah.
Eventually, life will calm down and we'll figure out what's going on. I don't have anything in the future that I'm set out to do. I don't plan on um, doing any shows anytime soon, or if ever again. I've been there, I've done that, but just learning to live a normal life outside of bodybuilding. um, so yeah, goals in itself is to hopefully move up with the my career, continue to be as active as I am, and be there 100% for my family.
Well, and those are all very, very worthwhile endeavors. If it's okay for someone to reach out to you, how do you prefer they do that?
They can reach out to me through Instagram or through Facebook, which is the preferred way of method. I am semi-private on both, so they will have to explain that they've um, seen this, just because the littles and grandkids and all that fun stuff. So,
Yeah, I
but I
totally
am
understand.
I'm more than willing to help answer questions. Um, I can lead you in the right direction of some really good amputee trainers. I just don't have the time to give out free workouts or or nutrition advice for that matter. I always used to say, like, you can put down the fork, start there. So
Yeah, I'm a little, I can be a little curt with people. I get frustrated and I'm just like, you do have a choice. Like, just stop. But I know for some people that's not as easy as it is for me. And, we have to try to, show some empathy in those situations. And hopefully we can, change our habitual issues and just create little behavioral modifications to the point where,
yeah,
you're
exactly.
yeah, you're doing it as a lifestyle. And the way in which, you live your lifestyle, your fitness level, and everything that you're doing, and you're pursuing to live your best life as an amputee. And I so appreciate you sharing all of that. And of course, I will, continue to follow you. Jenny, thank you so much for being here. I am Rick Bonkowski. This is the Amped Up to 11 podcast, and I want to wish everyone health and happiness, and we will see you next time.